On the 4th of April 175, the Celts of the northwestern provinces rebelled once again, this time under the banner of Avarignia. Bappo was entirely unprepared for this, and so called upon the eastern allies for aid. They all joined and began the war against rebellious Avarignia. The rebellion was over in 174. They never really stood much of a chance, but nonetheless it was a bad omen for Bappo's reign. He was a disloyal thorn in the sides of preceding chiefs, and now it was shown that people were more than happy to return the favor. It was unclear if his slavish loyalty to the council would save his skin or not. By September of that year, Rome won a major string of victories and pushed north through Germania, almost to the Oceanus Sarmaticus. Meanwhile, Phrygia was riddled with revolts, and Morea was embroiled in a full-on civil war, though Persia had almost finally finished theirs. In order to attempt a recovery of his image, Bappo declared war on Gigoria to the south, a far weaker local power that would ensure a speedy victory for him. Indeed, the war was over quickly, in a matter of months in fact, and the execution of the Gigori nobility brought him great popularity. Seeing that further conquest might tempt the Carthaginians, Bappo sought to buoy his wartime accolades on the back of a series of proposed internal reforms, the most prominent of which by far was to determine a new method of rule based on foreign systems. This appealed to his more intellectual nature, and would distract from his many shortcomings. Essentially, the question was thus: should Avarignia become a monarchy or a republic? Bappo thought the answer was obvious, and sought to take pressure off himself and his office by drastically increasing the power of the council, transmuting them into a senate. The Indicidi family supported monarchism, using their relation to Similci to argue their position, while the Caridi family, who had many members on the tribal council, was in favor of republican-style governance, highlighting the ineffectiveness of certain prior chiefs, and how every succession is followed closely by at least some period of instability. Public debates were held and went on for the whole year of 172 BC. Violence even broke out in Cayaeum, with the young Indo-Indicidus stabbing Nicanon Caridus 30 times in the middle of the public square. He was tried and sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of his days. If the Indicidi got their way, they would become the ruling dynasty over Avarignia, and this was an unacceptable outcome for the Caridi family, who had now fashioned themselves as the vanguard of the nascent republic. Ultimately, however, when it came to the final decision, the ruling went in favor of the Caridi family, and their proposition of a republic. Many say it came down to the simple fact that the Caridi were a larger family, and with more voices came greater sway. The head of the Indicidi clan, Delininar Indicida, who would have become queen, poisoned herself with hemlock and fell into the sea. Preparations began in March of 171 for the construction of the Senate chambers. In December, Verdulia called Avarignia into a war against Sibuzatia, which would be a doomed affair without Avarigine forces to shore up their advance. On the 25th of February, 170 BC, Bappo Nicinus died of a terrible fever, and Stena Ishabella became the new chiefess at the age of 65. Instead of sparking a civil war in the middle of a foreign conflict, she decided to allow the work of endeavoring towards a republic to continue. By August of 167, Vardulia survived its war with Sibuzatia. In August of that year, a local official named Culcus Nicinus was brought to trial by chiefess Stena Ishabella. Once protected under the rule of his blood relative Bappo, Culcus had in the meantime gotten to personally enriching himself, weakening ties with Cayaeum, and even fomenting disloyalty towards the rest of the tribe in favor of deference towards his office. Culcus Nicinus became overwhelmed during the trial, and mistakenly assuming he was acting on behalf of the prosecution, somehow accused himself of a wide variety of crimes. As the trial progressed, the Indicidi family vouched for him and his innocence, though it was revealed that this was because Culcus worked against his relative in secret in order to secure the formation of an Indicidi monarchy. This did nothing to help his case, and turned the council against him yet further, because even as his first level of crimes were being excused under the protection of his relative Bappo, he exercised a second level of crimes against his very own flesh and blood in the hopes that the people he aided with his underhanded dealings would increase his wealth and cover for him further. He was found guilty of all charges and publicly beheaded. Nakarada, a deeply religious man, was given the post that Culchus left empty. On the 19th of June 165 BC, the provinces that Culchus once ruled over proved so disloyal that they erupted into full rebellion. The place that now called itself Lusitania Septentrionalis had grown so used to the corrupt channels, bribes, and general ways of doing business that they were driven to the breaking point without them. In 163, Stena Isabella began to develop dementia. In September of that year, the Pejori remnant came to aid the revolt, desperate for a buffer state between them and their greatest enemy. In May of 162 BC, not only was the revolt undone, but Pejoria was finally conquered for good. It would seem that Stena Isabella would be leaving her post on a sweet note of stability and even mild expansion. On the 14th of May 154, Stena Isabella died of stress at the age of 81. The council convened and agreed that the 63-year-old Nissinen Indicitus should be the next chief. A veteran, alienated from the rest of his family for his marriage of a common woman, he swore to protect the creation of the Republic from all threats within and without. Later that year, Crete conquered a fair portion of Egypt west of the Nile, which took the known world by surprise. Far to the east, in 144 BC, two empires were fighting over control of India, the Maurya in the north and the Dravidia in the south. In November of that year, Nissinen developed dementia, an unfortunate turn of events for such a promising candidate. On the 15th of February 143, a Celtic rebellion once again reared its head, under the banner of Lusitania Septentrionalis once more. They called this the Second Celtic Rebellion, rejecting the validity of revolts under other Celtic families. Immediately, the rebellion regretted their decision and agreed to surrender if Pejoria was liberated from Avarignia. This was seen as an insult, and a siege immediately began against their impromptu capital of Centum Caelas. On the 2nd of December 140 BC, Nissinen Indicitus died in flagrante delicto at the age of 78. The council convened, and after much worrisome debate, hatched a rather devious plan. They agreed that, in order to secure the delivery of the Republic, they would appoint a series of elderly, inept fools to the position of chief, not only ensuring that the Republic would remain unchallenged by any succeeding chief, but even disgracing the very office of chief itself. As such, they elected Arvarus Isharbeli, a Druidic Celt, as the next chief. The council publicly said that it was for the best, given he was adopted by an established family, and also that he may quell future rebellious spirits among the Celts later on. The 79-year-old was surprisingly healthy, if not long for this world, and promised to lead a policy of cultural universalism, stating that he cared only for the job a man did. Regardless of the council's intentions, however, Avarignia grew less stable with him at the helm. He died of natural causes at the age of 80, and the tribe as a whole sighed a breath of relief. Succeeding him was the 69-year-old Nakarada, and she very much did care about a man's birth and blood, resuming the course preceding her predecessor's brief reign. On the 25th of November 134 BC, Nakarada died in flagrante delicto at the age of 74, and the 64-year-old Tiate Indicita was chosen as the new chiefess. Her rule was uneventful, and she died in 120 BC of natural causes at the age of 77. The council then elected 71-year-old Bulgios Isharbeldi to the position of chief, who had adopted the Celtic way of life much like Arvarus before him. Under him, he enacted the laws of equal integration, meaning that the Celts would be treated on the same level of legal rights as pre-Indo-Europeans in the coming republic. This threw social strata across the tribe into total disarray, and another rebellion began to brew as a result. Bulgios was also fond of freeing slaves, and did so wantonly whenever he heard of a story that touched his heart. On the 21st of January 118 BC, the unthinkable happened, and Carthage declared war on Avarignia. In fact, they declared war on the entire region, including Autragonia, Vardulia, Cancania, and Tamaricia. The Celtic tribes of Sibuzatia and Vocatia aided Carthage in their invasion, a war which would be called the First Carthago-Avarigine War. 70,000 Carthaginian soldiers descended on the tribes of the region, as Avarignia scrambled to raise an army large enough to oppose Carthage, the despoiler of nations. By October of 116, Caem had fallen, the treasury ran dry, and almost every battle fought against the insurmountable Carthaginians was lost. It seemed for a long while that old foolish Bulgaeus would be the last chief of Avarignia. However, whisperings were heard of an aggressive Rome, and anxiety back in the capital. This was all Avarignia had to hope on. Bulgaeus Isherbeldi died eating rotten herring on the 11th of February 114 BC at the age of 75. The council abandoned their policy of favoring ineptitude in light of these recent developments and threw the nearest general into the position of chief, that general being Tiresio Nisunus. 53 years old, he held a long history of martial prowess under his belt. In April of 114, Carthage annexed Ostragonia. Carthage began sending demands for surrender, but either out of honor or stubbornness, the wandering army headed by the remaining nobility declined each one of them, preferring to fight to the last and die in war than surrender. In 114, the province of Zoelia decided to launch a war of independence against Avarignia. Meanwhile, many lofty dreams were realized on the 16th of September when Consul Gnaeus Cornelius of the Roman Republic declared war on Carthage with the aim of taking Carthago itself. By 112 BC, the Carthaginians had abandoned their war with Avarignia and would settle into an uncomfortable white peace. While the two titans fought over the Mediterranean Sea, Avarignia was left to pick up the pieces. Narrowly escaping death yet again, it was clear to the Avarignian elite that much more power would need to be acquired if they were to survive in such a world. One channel of power was wealth, and situated so close to a trade empire allowed for raiding parties to be sent to coastal towns all over Carthage, especially with the war on. Chief Teresio sent the raiding parties to sea on the 25th of September, and this would mark the very beginning of a long and proud tradition. These raiding parties would bring back material wealth, but for the very first few decades they would primarily bring slaves back to Avarignia. In 111 BC, Telluria and Cancania revolted and broke free from a distracted Carthage. In August of that year, Carthage broke into a civil war. Further east, Crete invaded Phrygian Greece, occupying nearly the entire region, marking itself out as a rising star in the eastern Mediterranean. Meanwhile, yet another war broke out south of Avarignia as the newly independent Telluria, Doniquia, and Polletia made war against their neighbors, including their former master, Carthage. Rome eventually made peace with Carthage in December of 108 BC, taking most of Sicily with them. Meanwhile, Judea was conquered by Phrygia in 106 BC. In October, an alliance was formed with the other regional power of the Iberian Peninsula, Ilergatia. The next year, the Carthaginian Civil War ended in March of 105 BC, the reigning elite maintaining their hold on what was left of the empire. On the 10th of December, Lusitania Septentrionalis revolted alongside Zoelia in the Third Celtic Rebellion. The Third Celtic Rebellion was put down in 102 BC, due in large part to Avarignia's new ally, Ilergatia. In 97 BC, Tiresio contracted cancer. Due to the fragile state of the economy, Tiresio forced Malleus Isherbeldi to render some of his riches to the tribe, as his trade in silver had made him independently wealthy. Many viewed this as a tyrannical yet necessary move. It was this money that allowed Tiresio to enact grain rations, giving essentially free grain to certain impoverished populations and increasing the birth rate. In 95 BC, Tiresio Nicinus succumbed to his cancer, and Lagunas Indicitus ascended to the seat of chief. Lagunas made it the mission of his reign to delay and perhaps even sabotage the arrival of the Republic. He even believed that his ancestor, the matriarch of his house, Similce herself, was speaking directly to him when he visited sites of worship. As long as her blood flowed through his veins, he would not allow the Republic to grow like a weed in the very country she reared like a mother. Indeed, Chief Lagunas and his reverence for his great ancestor established her cult in Cayenne, beginning a long yet persistently niche syncretic tradition of nationalist earth goddess worship in the form of Similchi Indichita and her sacred bloodline. Needless to say, this cult would come to be one of the most vociferous enemies of the nation's republic, the most ravenous wolf which prowled about the cradle it did not yet occupy.